Hello, everyone. Welcome to the stephenkingcast, one man's musings on the works of Stephen King. Once I reviewed each of his works in the chronological order of publication, but Ka is a wheel, it all goes round again, and here I am once more back at the beginning on a new phase of the journey to examine each of the endings of the works of Stephen King, to determine whether or not King deserves his reputation for having an inability to successfully land his endings. The focus of the podcast will be to examine the climax, the falling action, and resolution of the endings to each of his novels and break it down by character, themes, conflict, and plot to determine whether or not it meets the criteria of being an objectively good ending. I'm also going to weigh in on whether or not I happen to personally like the ending. Before we begin, I'm going to read a couple iTunes reviews that came in over the last couple days. Up first, I have Rush Note, who writes, one of my favorite casts, 5 stars. This is easily one of my favorite podcasts among all of the podcasts I listen to, not just Stephen King casts. The host is enthusiastic, knowledgeable, and seems like a genuinely nice guy, even if I don't agree with his take on Storm of the Century, LOL. Seeing the notification that a new episode has been released always puts a smile on my face. One word of warning, though, his quote-unquote reviews are not reviews in the typical sense, but include a pretty detailed synopsis. So if you haven't read a particular book and don't want to be spoiled, avoid that episode until you've finished the book. Anyway, if you're a constant reader, you'll love this fun and insightful podcast. So Rush Noel, thank you so much for writing in. And then we have Kelvin K. Jones, who writes, the best podcast to go on your, I don't know what the rest of it says, but he gives me 5 stars, which I appreciate. I've been an avid listener of the podcast over the last 3 years. It's a great place to get a different perspective of another quartet member, such as the host. Long days and pleasant nights. So thank you so much, guys, for writing in. I really appreciate it. I can't do it without you. So if you have any spare time on your hands, please write in and leave a review on iTunes. It really, really helps me out. So any time that you spend, I really appreciate it. Okay, so I have one listener email that I will read before getting into my review of the ending of Eyes of the Dragon, which, as longtime listeners know, it's my favorite Stephen King book. No, it's not. I do not like Eyes of the Dragon. Admittedly, I'm going to say it up front right now. It's not for me. I know that it has a lot of fans out there, but this is one particular book that I have just... I was gonna say that I've tried to get into. I don't even know if I've given the book the benefit of the doubt in that regard. I read it back in the day. I thought it was light. I thought it was thin. I didn't love it, and then I later, reread it for the purposes of the podcast, and I more actively disliked it than kind of just not being into it the way that I was the first time around. But I am interested to get into the ending and really start to parse out the ending and see whether or not it lives up to the questions that I'll pose to it. So this is always interesting when you hit something that you just personally don't like, and you're forced to look at it objectively to see whether or not your subjectivity is overruled by objectivity, or if the objectivity overrules the subjectivity. And that's what we have found this week for Eyes of the Dragon. So I look forward to getting into that. But before I get any further, I'm going to read a listener email. Dear Stephen Kingcast, greetings from the UK. After coming across your podcast a few years ago, you have kept me entertained for hours, be it at home or on the drive to and from work, and I want to say a huge thank you for all the time and hard work that you put in on what I believe is one of the best podcasts out there dedicated to Stephen King. At the moment, I'm working my way through all of his books, not in the chronological order, but in the order of my choosing. I'm over halfway there, and once I've reached my goal, I will then start again, but this time in order of publication. And when I finish a book, the first thing I look forward to is listening to your podcast and hearing your thoughts on the book I've just completed. My favorite book is It. I remember my parents letting me watch the 1990 miniseries with them when I was just 7, and Pennywise scared the hell out of me, but looking back now, it's with fond memories as my mother recently passed away, so I thank her for getting me hooked into Stephen King. I also have The Stand, 11/22/63, The Dead Zone, and The Dark Tower series in my top 5. I think I've been meaning to write in for a while, and I've finally done it, so I will end this email by saying again a huge thank you to all your time, effort, and hard work with this fantastic podcast. Stay safe during these difficult times. Many thanks, Aaron Jones. Aaron, thank you for writing in, and I had written to Aaron, but I still wanted to take the opportunity to offer my condolences. I'm very sorry for your loss. Okay, guys, if you have any time on your hands, please write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. I can't do it without you, and I love this back and forth, and I love the dialogue, and I love the opportunity to be able to share your Stephen King stories and your relationship with Stephen King and your thoughts on Stephen King stories, and the endings of anything that I've covered so far, the ending to Eyes of the Dragon, or anything coming up. My last episode that I just reviewed was the full analysis of If It Bleeds. Well, I shouldn't say analysis. It wasn't as detailed as my analyses had been during the first stretch of the podcast, the first 200 episodes or so. This was more of a just a generalized review with my last subjectivity. But if you have any thoughts on If It Bleeds, The Outside, or anything, just write into stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. Okay, guys, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to read the Wikipedia summary for Eyes of the Dragon so that I have a basis upon which we can discuss the conclusion to determine, again, whether or not the ending is quote-unquote good. Taking place in a medieval-inspired fantasy world, American author Stephen King's fantasy novel The Eyes of the Dragon tells the story of Flag, a devious magician who plots to destroy the kingdom of Delain and its fair-minded ruler, King Roland. While a standalone book, The Eyes of the Dragon contains locations and characters mentioned in other King works, including The Stand and the Dark Tower series. When the novel begins, King Roland the Good rules the kingdom of Delain. The magician Flag, his royal advisor, served in this position for many years before Roland's ascent. Flag served under Roland's mother, Queen Leda, who always held a measure of distrust against him. Her suspicions were not unfounded. Flag has long been plotting to destroy the kingdom of Delain from his position as chief advisor. Although Roland largely trusts him, his faith begins to waver after Roland marries Sasha, believing Sasha is an innocent and unassuming noble girl who poses little threat to his plans to bring ruin to Delain. Flag encourages Roland to marry her. Contrary to Flag's hopes, however, Sasha is a naturally strong, independent, and intelligent woman whose love for Roland is genuine. As Roland grows closer to her, she successfully influences her husband's opinion of Flag, leading him to finally see the truth about Flag's veiled treachery. Unhappy about no longer being Roland's most trusted advisor, Flag resolves to do away with Queen Sasha. A few years after giving birth to Roland's first son and heir, Peter, Sasha is now pregnant with a second child. Flag pays a midwife to mortally wound Sasha during childbirth, but not before delivering Roland's second son, Thomas. Flag breathes a sigh of relief as everybody in the kingdom, including Roland, concludes that Sasha died a natural death during childbirth, which was tragically not uncommon during the medieval era.
When you buy LG, you get so much more than just an appliance. You get more done, more cost savings, more peace of mind, and more control. Because LG appliances are designed to do more. Like washers and dryers with AI tech to take out the guesswork, refrigerators that fit in tight spaces and keep food fresher longer, or ranges with precise induction cooking and easy cleanup built in, all with the style you want and reliability you can count on, so you can get more from your home every day. LG Appliances. So much more. Make life easier with LG. See the latest models and savings now at lg.com.
Era. As Peter and Thomas come of age, it becomes clear which one is favored among the two. Peter is tall and graceful like his mother, while Thomas is shorter and stockier like his father. While Thomas is a good archer and hunter like his dragon-slaying father, Peter, the rightful heir to the throne and more naturally charismatic of the two, is treated much more kindly by the royal court and citizenry. Flag sees this development as an opportunity to poison Thomas against his father. Whenever Thomas is feeling depressing about being the less popular child, Flag swoops in to nurture the boy's bitterness, allowing it to fester until it becomes almost an obsession. Flag also reveals that by looking through the eye holes of the skull of the dragon Roland once killed, Thomas can spy on his father in his private quarters. Successfully endearing himself to Thomas, Flag unleashes his plan to regain power over the throne of Delain. First, he kills Roland with a batch of magically enhanced poisonous sand that causes the king's insides to boil. After dispatching Roland, Flag leaves a few grains of the poisoned sand in Peter's room, so the authorities believe him to be the murderer. The royal guard quickly sentences Peter to be locked away in an aerial dungeon known as the Needle. Meanwhile, Thomas is all too happy to ascend to the throne with Flag as his most trusted right-hand man. Because Thomas is only 12 years old, Flag is considered the de facto ruler of Delain. Almost immediately, Peter hatches a plan for his escape. He appeals to Judge Anders Pena to grant him two seemingly innocuous requests: for the guards to deliver him napkins with every meal, and to have his mother's intricate dollhouse brought to him in his cell. After the judge agrees, Peter sets to work creating a long rope using threads from the napkins and the miniature loom in his mother's dollhouse. It takes him 5 years, but finally, Peter has a rope long enough to descend the tower safely. Meanwhile, in Peter's absence, a large support group of allies has formed around the belief that Peter was innocent all along. Peter and his supporters confront Flag in Roland's old sitting room, the site of King's murder, but Flag is too powerful for them to defeat. Just when Flag is about to vanquish Peter, however, Thomas enters the room shooting Flag with a flaming arrow. Using magic, Flag vanishes before the arrow can make contact. Thomas tearfully admits that he witnessed his father's murder at the hands of Flag, ironically, though the very eyes of the dragon revealed to him by Flag. Despite saving his brother's life, thus atoning for his past sins, Thomas becomes even more of a pariah in his kingdom than ever before. With nothing left to keep him in Delane, Thomas sets out to find Flag. The book ends the moment Thomas finds his old advisor, but the reader never learns what happens next. Okay, so with the Wikipedia summary out of the way, let's talk about the actual ending of The Eyes of the Dragon. So in order to really determine whether or not it is a objectively, quote-unquote, good ending to this story, we are going to break apart the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. So really, it's everything onward from Flag murdering Roland, framing Peter, and manipulating Thomas into taking the throne. So that would be the climax, the falling action being Peter escaping the needle while Flag attempts to execute him, and the resolution, the heroes confront Flag, defeat him, Peter takes the throne, and Thomas and Dennis pursue the Man in Black. Okay, so I have, as I said earlier, long been on record stating that this is not one of my preferred Stephen King novels. I understand that it is designed to be stylistically different from what has come before and what will come later in the King oeuvre. It is a love letter to this style of sword and sorcery, fairy tale fantasy, and it's written for his children and Peter Straub's children. So I understand all of that. But I just, for all of my thoughts on Eyes of the Dragon, head on back to the Eyes of the Dragon episode. So I've struggled with being able to actually like this story, which is why I was very interested in being able to examine the conclusion to this story. So here are the questions that I'm going to ask the Eyes of the Dragon, and then hold what occurs within the conclusion of the story against these questions, to see whether or not, despite my lack of enthusiasm towards the text, whether or not, it lands successfully. Does it provide an appropriate conclusion to its characters that are consistent with the characters' actions, conflicts, or themes of the book? Yeah, I'd say. I mean, the heroes are heroic, the misunderstood are redeemed, the villains are vanquished, and the kingdom of Delane lives happily ever after. In terms of the characters, who are, fully designed for what they're supposed to be, they are consistent with what has come before, and they play their parts, and Thomas is able to have his conclusion. Peter is able to escape. Flag is revealed to be the cowardly creature that he is. So yeah, I would say that it's the conclusion to the characters are consistent with their actions, conflicts, and the themes of the book leading up to it. Does it successfully wrap up the plot, specifically to the events build upon one another with consistency? Yes, I would say, dollhouses and all. And I know that I'm not giving enough credit to the dollhouse subplot. It is actually at first a very well executed mystery as to why Peter would want the dollhouse, and then the suspense of him being able to hide it within the needle, and the time that it takes for him to do it is well done. And to see the end of that plot actualized is. I know that I have been facetious and I have cut down this story, but the execution of the conclusion to this plot is really well done. And as I'll get into, Flag finding out about it, Flag trying to come up the stairs, trying to end this before it ends for him, as everything converges towards the needle, is It's a master storyteller. I would say from a plot perspective, yeah, it successfully wraps up the plot. Does the conclusion serve the theme, the symbolisms, and the motifs? Yes, it fits with the young adult classic fantasy genre that King is playing with here. It feels very in line. It's appropriate and consistent to what he is trying to do. And then the next question is, what is the most famous scene in the novel, and does it appear in the conclusion of the story? Which is not grounds for an automatic... I should say that it's not a detriment if the most famous scene does not take place in the conclusion, but I don't think that it hurts. It's just a question that I like to ask. And I would say that, yes, in this case, I would say that the scene in which Peter attempts to escape from the needle while Flag rushes to murder him, taking 2 steps at a time, taking 3 steps at a time, taking 10 steps at a time, it's really, really well done, and it really ratchets up the tension. And I think that is the most famous scene in the novel. And are there any other factors that we need to consider? There is. I need to be, very honest and straightforward here. I need to be on the record again saying that this novel just doesn't do it for me, and that as objective as I try to be with these things, sometimes you can't take the person out of the reviewer or the critic. For whatever reason, there's a blockage there. And I really appreciate all the emails throughout the years, not coming at me, but just challenging my thoughts and trying to push me into being more lenient on this book and trying to have me see it through another perspective. And maybe it will come in time. But even through I didn't do a reread this time for the conclusion, but I skimmed through it again. And it just doesn't do it for me, and that's okay. So with all that said, do I like the ending? Okay, so here's the subjective question. As I stated, I don't really like the book. I think that it's thin, I think that's tropey, and I understand that that's all of King's point. It just can't win me over. However, with that said, the ending is satisfactory. As I said, when I was answering these questions, the construction is thrilling, and watching Flag take the stairs and wondering how it's all going to play out, King does a good job with it. I think that the conclusion to the story is the best part of the novel, and the escape from the tower is genuinely thrilling. Flag completely becomes his unhinged self and is sort of a wild card in all of this. So yeah, when I think what I do like about Eyes of the Dragon is that I like the ending. And based on the questions that I asked, I can't say that it's not a good ending. It's a book that I tend not to gravitate towards. I don't like it very much, but I both like the ending, and I think that as a capper to what had come before, it's a good ending. So the tally thus far is that I happen to like 12 out of 12 endings of what King has published up until this point. And I would argue that 11 of the 12 endings are good, Christine being the outlier there. Okay, guys, so heading into my thoughts on Eyes of the Dragon, I didn't know how I was going to come down on it. I kind of surprised myself by being so complimentary, but I can't argue with it. I think that it's an objectively good ending. So, it's kind of a shorter episode, under a half an hour. All right, so if you have any time on your hands, feel free to write in to stephenkingcast@yahoo.com. You can like the podcast, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and follow me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and on Blue Sky. And may you have long days and pleasant nights, and I will see you here next time where MOON spells Stephen King Cast.